Hello, writers! Have you ever bought a writing craft book someone says you just have to read?
Is it still sitting on your shelf? Have you even cracked the spine?
That's totally me!
Don't ask Renee how many craft books she owns.
Why do we keep buying these books we never read?
We all want to improve as writers, but that's hard to do alone.
That's why we started the Words to Write By podcast, to tackle these books together, chapter by chapter, and learn from their advice.
Or not. Sometimes they're wrong.
Hi, I'm Renee Nelson, former college writing instructor turned full-time writer and podcaster. After many years, I finally have a complete draft of my memoir.
And I'm Kim Smuga-Otto, author of the humorous fantasy series Boy Bands and Dragons. The first book, Our Comeback Tour Slaying Monsters, will be released this year by Riverfolk Publishing.
And now, on with the podcast.
Welcome to one of our workshop episodes. Now, this workshop is from Judith Barrington's Writing the Memoir, and it's about using proper place names in your writing. Can you read the exercise?
Yes, this is from Chapter 8, Naming Names, from Judith Barrington's Writing the Memoir. And she says, think of a street name from a place you once lived. Describe that street in great detail. List stores or houses, anyone you know who lived there, things you remember happening on that street. And if you want to know why we're supposed to be doing this, you'll have to listen to the episode from last week. So mine was a little longer, so it gets the longer episode.
Okay. Before we get started, anything you want to say about the piece before you start?
It's too long. Some paragraphs are actually in my memoir, but I extended them a little bit, which might, now the new stuff might make its way in. We'll see.
Okay.
I'll have to see what Kim has to say about naming names. My one issue with this was that since I moved so much, I don't remember. We actually didn't make too many friends with neighbors, so we didn't really know the people that well, and street names meant nothing. So that was a little weird, but we'll see how it worked out. Okay. It was 1992, and I was 13 years old. Mom had rented the first floor of a yellow Victorian in Pacific Grove on 16th Avenue. Doors and doorways linked bedrooms to the kitchen, living rooms to dining rooms, and back through bedrooms again, like cozy tunnels and burrows as if designed by animated squirrels, rabbits, and moles who speak in British accents. The house was over 100 years old, so you had to unplug the refrigerator if you wanted to use the microwave, or the fuse would shut off the power to the kitchen. The wiring was like a pet you had to coax, predictable in its quirks and habits, moody yet delightful if you were patient enough to earn it. Just outside the yellow house, you could see the road sloping toward the ocean, flanked by old yellow, purple, and blue houses with windows as large as walls, lavender and salvia growing at our porches trimmed in white. As the street sloped down, cobalt ocean cut to a heather horizon where the breeze exhaled up the road and inhaled salt into the gardens, then short white fences, the houses, the people. We were just 2 blocks from Lover's Point, a popular park for tourists and weddings with picturesque oceanside rocks jutting out like a deck overlooking the Monterey Bay. Most people visited that rock and skipped the town, which was probably why the main strip on Lighthouse Avenue felt like a time capsule in a black and white episode of Leave It to Beaver. Even the stubborn fog permeating the town seemed to envelop the empty garden boutiques and cafes in grayscale. Mom and the house and Pacific Grove seemed made for each other. I was convinced the house asked Mom to place the pendulums and crystals on top of the television, to paint the wooden chairs in the kitchen, and populate her purple hippie clothes in the closet. Mom had tucked the couch into the angled pocket of the bay window and painted the dining room windowsills in faded blue swirls, and later dabbled stars amid a dark blue sky on the wooden kitchen chairs. Her drafting table took up the dining room, her paints in piles and her unfinished art stacked against walls. She was, quote, really doing it this time. She was, quote, finally living the life of an artist. Which is what she always wanted, what she wished for all the time, and why we moved from apartment to apartment, why I was about to enroll in my 11th school, and why she married, then divorced, the bloated alcoholic David. Why she dropped me off with my dad after her own mom died, and spent the sale of Grandma's condo on a trip across the country with her new boyfriend, John, in order to, quote, look for a place for us to live. We weren't the type to get to know our neighbors, so while other families, I assumed, gathered around the dinner table, Mom, her boyfriend John, and I lived Mom's hippie artist life with her and drank coffee and browsed the Enlightenment section of Bookworks, the local bookstore across from the post office, and a fine dining establishment called El Cocodrillo, where they apparently served crocodile. When I first moved here, my life revolved around Mom. She had just come back from camping with John across the United States and decided to settle in PG. While she was off on her adventure, I was dropped off at Grandma's house in Santa Clara and attended the 8th grade for a semester. I forgave her immediately when she came back and retrieved me when school let out for winter. I had a short memory and was easily bribed. She took me to the mall and bought me bell-bottoms, pants she herself used to wear in the 60s, which were now coming back in fashion 30 years later. She bought me a beret, and me, John, and Mama walked around the block from our house to the coffee shop, Linnea's, to listen to poetry. I'm going to skip all this part. It's because I need it. When we got home, I wanted to rub myself in the scraps of velvet dangling off the bookshelf or lounging underneath Mom's tarot decks. As if by wandering art galleries in neighboring Carmel or sipping coffee at a cafe in downtown Monterey, or sleeping and watching television and eating in the downstairs floor of the Victorian we rented blocks from the ocean on Del Monte Avenue, I began to feel more solid, more real, closer to the earth. In this house, we all got to live the life we wanted. In one winter break, Mom was forgiven for the previous 13 years, for the roach-filled apartments, the men, the alcoholic stepfather, the moving, then leaving me at the mercy of my sadistic cousin for 6 months. The house, the art, the galleries asked me to forgive her, so I did. Until the winter was over and I started school at Pacific Grove Middle School. By then, Mom was already bored with being a parent. As an artist, a lover, a packer, and a mover, she's in it for the new beginning high, the potion of potential. And in the early 90s anyway, there was really nothing for an unsupervised teenager to do in Pacific Grove than develop a cigarette addiction. Monterey locals described Pacific Grove as a place for the newlywed and nearly dead. There was even a strictly enforced 10 p.m. curfew for people under 18. On a clear summer day, there were probably more tourists in Pacific Grove huddled near the beach and oceanside restaurants than there were locals, which is why I had become the most bored teenager on earth. Whenever I see Juice and Java on Lighthouse Avenue, I think of the first full cigarette I ever smoked, given to me by a girl with a scar running down her cheek. She claimed I was faking it, so I blew the smoke out of my nose to prove her wrong. I smoked 4 more, then later writhed on the floor of my room 2 hours later, willing myself to puke, vowing to never smoke again. 15 years later, sucking on my 15th nicotine lozenge for the day, I had mixed feelings about that house on 16th Avenue. Bit of repetition there. Probably could cut that out. Yeah, it needed to be edited, but, it had to be written because we had to do this podcast.
And you did original writing for it, so that counts.
I did do original writing for it, and it was a little drafty, but, you'll forgive me, dear listener.
Mm-hmm. First of all, I enjoyed some of the stories there.
Okay.
I really liked the way you filled out what was really wonderful about the house when you first moved in and what was wonderful about your mom, and then how you jumped to what wasn't and the reasons why. And I think that was actually a nice arc of a story right there. A good one for your memoir. How would you describe your use of naming names in this piece?
Well, Mom's dead, and her name is Mom. So I mentioned her boyfriend. It's a typical enough name.
Right, but okay, so naming place names.
Oh, sorry. Well, I mentioned Pacific Grove, and to me, at first it's like, well, who cares? What does it matter? But then I realized, well, it's a very specific place, and a lot of people don't know much about that place. Yeah, what they do know about it is, like, as a tourist.
Right. It's very, very pretty. It's charming. It's got the Nature Museum there.
Yep. Natural History Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually almost, I would imagine, I'm not sure how much it would cost now, but back then, it wasn't exactly expensive to live there.
And actually, I will also say that I've been to those rocks looking over the ocean too. So
of course
pretty.
You have.
Yeah.
Those squirrels are pretty awesome. They'll go right up to you and try to eat out of your hand. Don't feed them, dear listener. Anyway, yeah. So it's an iconic place. You could just take a picture. People know exactly what it is. It is a little weird living. If you walk down the block a little bit, you could see it, from the house.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, though, I didn't know anything about the place. We just moved there, and I was like, okay, whoa, look at the oceans right there.
Yeah, and beautiful houses and beautiful streets and,
Yeah, it was charming, quote unquote, very, very charming on the surface.
I also like the visuals of your mother setting up her art stuff in the in the dining room. Actually, it reminded me of, we lived in a Victorian in Madison, Wisconsin, and I think it had a similar with the doors opening up and all that stuff.
I love old houses. Old, beautiful Victorian houses are beautiful. I think,
Although I like the detail about the electricity, because that suddenly that clicks in that this is not, one of those Victorians that are like they're the old Victorians that are amazingly kept in Instagram blogs and all that.
Oh.
And then there's the ones where you have to unplug the refrigerator to turn on the microwave.
right. And we only rented the downstairs. It wasn't a huge Victorian. I mean, it wasn't gigantic, and we only had the downstairs. But it was something. It was cool.
Yeah. Like when I was doing mine, I was checking a bunch of stuff in Google so I could use place names, even if they're places I didn't really go into that much because I knew that they would sound better. So I was wondering if you couldn't have gone in and, I mean, the thing is too, some of the places you went to were closed at that point. So you'd have to do a bit more research to really get the feel. But like there's a certain advantage to, even if you don't quite remember a place, to putting the proper name in it.
Yeah. If I had more time or if I cut down and I edited, I could have had room. I could mention like what's there now, like, oh, this used to be this abandoned store. There was an interesting abandoned store, I think, that was called Spree. And it had this really old, like 50s style sign out front, and it was big. And I was like, whoa, I wonder what they sold there. And then finally got replaced, and it got replaced by something extremely boring. And that's what happens at Pacific Grove. For some reason, they'll take something very interesting, and the thing that ends up moving in there is like a bank
That can make money.
I guess. I don't know. It was boring. It's a lot of stuff is boring. Some stuff is fun. They still have those garden boutiques. Our favorite restaurant has been changed. It's not the same. It's still good. There was a place called Chili Great Chili. We used to get these burgers. They were, oh my God, so good. And now it's gone. I don't know if it's the same owners, but it has a similar feel to it. It's not as good. Linnea's was like the best cafe in Monterey. It's gone. It's been gone for many, many years.
That is an aspect that's a little bit sad when you do these pieces where you're going in names, because you go back and you realize, oh, that place is gone. I had the weirdest experience on Google Maps. There was one frame in the street view that hadn't updated. So there was this big new building there, but if you were at just the right one point from the intersection looking down, it was still the old small building that was there before, which wasn't anything special. But then you took another step and suddenly there was this big modern building.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So it's like you're walking around town going, oh crap, there's this new building.
Well, if I hadn't had that little extra image, I wouldn't have remembered what was there because it wasn't anything terribly important. They build new buildings and the old stuff is gone. And if it's not something that you actively were remembering, it's gone there too. So there's a little bit of a sadness in doing this because you realize all that stuff is gone for good.
Like Pergolaces. Were you here for Pergs?
I got to go there once or twice.
Oh man, poor Pergolaces' cafe in Santa Cruz. It's so sad.
Yeah.
And San Luis Obispo, oh, how we loved thee, and then is now, bleh. Like it's just all corporate-y. It's like, why? Why do that to a downtown? Now, like, it's not even fun anymore. And they closed Blue Sky. Oh, yeah.
And yet at the same time, you're talking about, from a teenage perspective, they don't care about half that stuff anyway.
Sort of. Yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming it's interesting because people know what Monterey is, but to know it from a local's perspective, it's a very, very different place. If you've been to Pacific Grove, right? You said you went to did you go through the town?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we walked around.
Okay. What'd you think?
It was really cute. Actually, it was one of those places like, this is super cute. I would love to live in a place like this. But can you imagine how much these houses cost? They must cost so much money.
Yeah, now they do. Yeah, definitely. I don't know how boring it is anymore. I have walked down there and a lot of stuff's gone, but the bookworks at the end is actually, the cafe's gotten better.
The museum is fantastic.
Oh, there's some weird shit in there from Doc Ricketts. Ooh, it's good stuff. Yeah, that whale is a fun whale, big cement whale out front. You could take fun pictures.
Mm-hmm. Amazing collection of stuffed birds. Like for a science geek, it's really something.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of taxidermy. A little creepy for me.
Uh-huh.
I'm not much of a science geek.
Yeah, you were an artist in the town. They're different.
I wasn't an artist. Mom was an artist.
Right. Like you were walking around with a beret. You were, in your mind, an artist.
Yeah, sure. Oh, so there was a part in here I skipped, which was about a poetry reading she took me to, and it was the most boring thing on earth. It was so boring. That poet was awful. But somehow I still became a poet. What are you going to do?
There you go.
Anyway, what do you think? Would Barrington like my efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I think she would encourage you to use more. Like the assignment here was to come up with a bunch of like very specific place names. And you hit a certain amount of them. I think you are at a disadvantage because you didn't live in a place long enough to really connect with it and to connect with it while it changed as well. I was in Madison long enough for me to remember what all those buildings on Monroe Street look like. And then as they changed over time, and 20 years is a long time for a town. And, the place I came was very different than the place I left, and still different now. Place stories, they don't have to be something where you were there for a long time and you saw the changes. But if that's the circumstance, then using place names to show how the place changed is very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I could kind of do that. I have a couple friends out there and I do visit it. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's different and that's different. I don't have a strong connection to Pacific Grove. I have more of a connection to Monterey and downtown Monterey. So I could definitely do that with Alvarado Street.
At a certain point I was writing this was like, yeah, that's kind of interesting here. That's kind of interesting there. But like, I wasn't sure how it connected to my life as much. Like I can make it connect, but it wasn't the same enthusiasm I had for some of the other pieces that really connected. And I really wanted to dig into it. I mean, yours actually did connect to your life quite nicely. Like it was a time in your life, and it was a shift and transition.
Yeah, Monterey is an interesting place, and I will have to write about it in my book. Like class distinction is so strong there. It's like its own petri dish or its own
ecosystem.
Yeah, it's its own socioeconomic class ecosystem, and it's weird and it's depressing, and it's very hard to get anywhere if you don't already have money.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, hey, I don't want to depress things, bring things down. Anyway, so I hope that was fun.
Yeah, and for people doing this themselves, you can see how using the place names really did bring out the stories in your memoir.
And you're an expert, and readers are really going to be interested. I mean, I am. I'm super interested. Like, I let Wisconsin stuff and your piece that you talked about in the previous episode, I really liked that. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm there. I'm traveling. So yeah, don't short us on the details.
Mm-hmm. Take some extra time to remember them, to research them. Maybe when you're going through your memoir afterwards, you're going through sections, take a look and say, could I actually give this place its actual name?
Right.
Could I show where this was in relationship to something else? This anecdote here could be enhanced by giving it like a set location.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you that I one of the places I lived in Sacramento, I couldn't find it because I didn't know the address and I just knew the street name, which was not helpful because it was called P Street. So I was looking around on Google Maps. I just could not find this place no matter where I was turning. And so what I did, because I was trying to find it to write about it, and I found the lady, I forget her name. She was the serial killer. She killed a bunch of men and buried them in her yard. Like she was old and she would take in people who were getting their Social Security checks.
Arsenic and old lace sort of setup.
Kind of, yeah. I forget her name. Apparently there's like a whole podcast on her. I don't know, or someone did like those true crime. There's a whole season on her. I lived there. I lived only 2 blocks away from her. So I was able to look up her address.
And then go 2 blocks in either direction and find where you were.
And that's how I found the apartment we lived in, was because I through the internet and newspapers, I was able to figure out her house. And then
the internet is an amazing, like if you can think of like a little detail that might be specific, and especially if you attach it to the name of the street. The internet searches can be very good at picking up news stories. Some places I found because, well, there was an article written when it closed because it was such an institution.
And it's cool. I like that street view. It's almost like you're walking or driving by.
It is like you're walking by. Okay.
Yeah. All right, then. I hope that was helpful.
And we will be back next week. We might do the final episode from this book next week.
I think I'm ready to do the final episode.
I think we're ready.
We're ready because we've got another one coming up.
Uh-huh.
It's a doozy.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. And if you are interested in meeting other writers and talking about writer's process, we have a meetup every Wednesday. You can find the information on our website, words2writebypodcast.com, or you can go into Meetup and search for it there.
And it's free.
And every other Wednesday, we do a writing spree. So if you just need to force yourself to get an extra couple hours in on a Wednesday evening, we are Pacific time, 5 p.m.
Yep.
So, okay.
All righty.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Words to Write By is produced by Renee Nelson and Kim Smiga-Allen. Our theme music is Roll Back the Carpet by Cool Cat Music. Have a great day.
got the hot turkey. It was like getting Thanksgiving dinner whenever you wanted. So, so good.